In a heartwarming encounter, a gentle Labrador named Himalaya spots Herman, a boy with Down syndrome. Their unexpected interaction will leave you in tears and restore your faith in the power of unexpected connections. As the sun set in Buenos Aires, Herman sat on the front steps of his small house, his wide and curious eyes scanning the quiet street before him, taking in the familiar sights of his neighborhood. Unlike most children, his age, 5-year-old Herman wasn't waiting for friends to come play or watching for his parents to return from work. He was simply existing. Herman had Down syndrome, a condition that set him apart from other children in ways both visible and invisible. His slightly slanted eyes and flattened facial features were the outward signs immediately noticeable to those who encountered him. His smaller stature and slightly larger tongue, which sometimes affected his speech, were also physical manifestations of his condition. While other kids ran, shouted, and played, their laughter echoing through the neighborhood, Herman preferred the quiet. He found solace in observation, content to watch the world go by from the safety of his front steps. This inclination towards solitude wasn't simply a personality quirk, but a complex interplay of cognitive and sensory differences. Herman's brain processed information differently, making the cacophony of children's play overwhelming and often frightening. The rapid movements, sudden noises, and unpredictable nature of other kids' games were like a sensory storm to him, one he couldn't navigate comfortably. Moreover, Herman's developmental delays meant that he struggled with the social cues and unspoken rules that governed children's play. The quick back and forth of conversation, the subtle body language, and the ever-changing dynamics of group activities were like a foreign language to him. Rather than face the confusion and potential rejection, Herman remained on the periphery, watching but never participating. Then, a golden flash caught Herman's eye as the evening air grew cooler. A Labrador retriever was trotting down the street, its coat shimmering in the fading light. The dog's owner, a middle-aged woman, walked a few paces behind, giving her pet some freedom to explore. The Labrador, named Himalaya, approached Herman with an almost human caution. There was no bounding excitement, no loud barks or wagging tail. Instead, Himalaya moved with a deliberate gentleness, as if she understood that this child was different, special. Herman's eyes widened slightly as the dog drew near. His fingers, idly tracing patterns on the concrete, grew still. Himalaya stopped a few feet from him, settling onto her haunches with a soft huff of breath. Her warm brown eyes never left the boy's face, filled with patience and understanding. Herman's mother watched from the living room window. She had seen this scene play out countless times before. A friendly neighbor or curious child would approach Herman, only to be met with silence and a blank stare. Her heart ached for her son, wishing he could experience the simple joy of connection that came so easily to others. But something about this moment felt different. Herman's mother held her breath. Would her baby be scared of the dog and burst into tears? Would the dog bark and shatter the peace, or would its owner approach her to ask why her son wasn't playing with the dog like every other child? None of those things happened. And then, almost imperceptibly, Herman shifted his gaze. Usually so vacant, it now focused on Himalaya. A tiny crease appeared between his eyebrows, a sign of concentration his mother recognized from his therapy sessions. He was trying to understand and process this new presence in his world. As if sensing Herman's internal struggle, Himalaya inched forward ever so slightly. Her movement was so gradual that it was barely noticeable, yet it brought her close enough that Herman could reach out and touch her if he chose. The boy's mother bit her lip to keep from making a sound, afraid that even the slightest noise might break the spell. As Herman's fingers hovered inches from Himalaya's fur, the dog did something remarkable. She lowered her head, pressing her muzzle gently against the boy's palm. The touch stirred something within Herman. His eyes grew wider, and for the first time in what seemed an eternity, a small but genuine smile played across his lips. The subtle change in his expression hinted at an awakening, a spark of life reignited by the simple act of contact. Encouraged by Herman's response, Himalaya edged closer still. She was now sitting beside him, her warm presence contrasting with the cool evening air. Herman's hand moved from her muzzle to her ear, his touch feather-light as he explored the soft fur. Himalaya's owner, who had been watching from a respectful distance, approached Herman's mother at the window. In hushed tones, she explained that Himalaya was a trained therapy dog. She worked with children who had various special needs, but she had never seen her connect with a child quite like this before. As the two women talked, their voices barely above a whisper, Herman continued his quiet exploration of Himalaya. His movements were slow and deliberate, but there was a newfound curiosity in his eyes that his mother hadn't seen in years. Suddenly, Herman did something that made both women gasp. He leaned forward and wrapped his arms around Himalaya's neck in a gentle hug. The dog remained perfectly still, allowing the boy this moment of connection. Herman settled back onto the step as the embrace ended, but he kept one hand buried in Himalaya's fur. The smile on his face had grown, transforming his features into a picture of contentment. Himalaya's owner, seeing her dog's profound impact on Herman, made his mother an offer that would change their lives forever. She suggested that Himalaya could visit the little boy regularly under her supervision as a form of animal-assisted therapy. Herman's mother agreed without hesitation, feeling hopeful for the first time in a long while. As Himalaya and her owner prepared to leave, promising to return soon, Herman did something that left both women in awe. He looked directly at the dog and whispered, "Bye-bye." It was the first word he had spoken in a while. Herman's mother noticed subtle changes in her son in the following days. He seemed more alert and more present in his surroundings. During his regular therapy sessions, his therapist remarked on his improved focus and willingness to engage. Himalaya's visits became the highlight of Herman's week. Each time the Labrador appeared, the boy's face lit up with a joy his mother had almost forgotten he could express. As weeks turned into months, Herman's progress astounded everyone around him. He began using simple words more frequently with Himalaya and his family. His therapist incorporated the dog into their sessions, using Himalaya as a bridge to help Herman connect with the world around him. But life, as it often does, had other plans. Just as things seemed to be looking up for Herman and his family, tragedy struck. Himalaya's owner fell ill. What started as a simple cold quickly developed into pneumonia, landing her in the hospital. She could no longer care for her pet, so the dog was temporarily put in a shelter. When Herman realized Himalaya wasn't coming for their usual visit, he became withdrawn again. The progress he had made began to slip away, leaving his mother frantic with worry. She tried to explain to Herman that Himalaya would return, but her son's limited understanding made it difficult for him to grasp the concept of temporary separation. Determined not to lose the ground her son had gained, his mother made a decision. She reached out to the shelter where Himalaya was staying and asked if she could bring her son for a visit. The shelter agreed but warned that the dog had been depressed since being separated from her owner. The day of the visit arrived, and Herman's mother brought a subdued Herman to the shelter. As they walked through the rows of kennels, the dissonance of barking dogs overwhelmed the boy. He clung to his mother's hand, his eyes darting nervously from side to side. But then they reached Himalaya. The dog was curled up in the corner, her usual vibrant energy dimmed by her circumstances. For a moment, Herman's mother's heart sank. Would Himalaya even recognize her son? Would this visit do more harm than good? Her fears were put to rest the moment Himalaya lifted her head. The dog's ears perked up, and her tail thumped against the floor. She excitedly rose to her feet, her body language showing she recognized her small friend. Herman, hiding behind his mother's legs, peeked out. His eyes locked with Himalaya's, and in that instant, the bond between them reignited. He let go of his mother's hand and moved toward the kennel door, his fingers reaching through the bars to touch Himalaya's nose. The shelter staff, moved by the obvious connection between the boy and the dog, opened the door. Himalaya stepped out, but instead of jumping up in excitement, she gently nuzzled Herman's face, her tail wagging furiously. For the first time since Himalaya had stopped visiting, Herman laughed out loud. The sound, so pure and joyful, echoed through the shelter, causing heads to turn and smiles to spread. Herman's mother watched in amazement as they reunited. Her son talked more in those few minutes than in the past week, a stream of simple words and delighted giggles pouring from him. At that moment, she decided to foster the dog until her owner felt better. She asked the shelter staff about it. They explained that Himalaya's owner still had custody and would need her permission, but they promised to contact her in the hospital. Days passed, filled with anxiety and hope. Herman's mother visited Himalaya's owner in the hospital, explaining and pleading her case. The owner knew her recovery would be long, and she couldn't bear the thought of Himalaya languishing in the shelter or Herman regressing without his friend. So she didn't just give her blessing for fostering her dog, she allowed her to adopt her. With the owner's blessing, Herman's mother began the adoption process. The day they brought Himalaya home was one of celebration. Herman, who usually shied away from the commotion, was in the thick of it, his hand never leaving the dog's fur. The impact of having Himalaya as a permanent part of their family was profound. Herman's progress, which had stopped when his best friend wasn't there, started again. He became more vocal, willing to interact with others, and showed an increased interest in the world around him. Himalaya, true to her training, seemed to instinctively know when Herman needed comfort and when he needed encouragement. She would lie quietly beside him during his meltdowns, her steady presence a balm to his overstimulated senses. During therapy sessions, she actively participated, helping Herman focus and motivating him to push through challenging tasks. Herman's connection with Himalaya deepened, as did his connections with the people around him. He began to make eye contact more frequently, respond to his name more consistently, and even initiate interactions with his family members. One particularly memorable moment came during a family gathering. Usually, Herman would retreat to a quiet corner, overwhelmed by the noise and activity. But with Himalaya by his side, this time he remained in the living room. When his cousin approached, curious about the dog, Herman didn't shy away. Instead, he looked at his cousin, then at Himalaya, and said clearly, "My friend." The room fell silent, then erupted in joyful tears and laughter. Herman, startled by the reaction, buried his face in Himalaya's fur, but there was a smile on his face that spoke volumes about his growing understanding of connection and belonging. Herman's confidence grew with Himalaya by his side, so his mother decided it was time for him to attend the local park playground more regularly. The park had always been a source of anxiety for Herman, with its noisy swings, shouting children, and unpredictable interactions. But with Himalaya's calming presence, he began to show interest in the colorful slides and merry-go-rounds that had once seemed so intimidating. They started with 10-minute visits and slowly built their confidence around every park area. On a particularly sunny Saturday afternoon, Herman's mother decided it was the perfect day for a longer visit to the park. The air was filled with the sweet scent of blooming flowers, and children's laughter echoed across the playground. Herman clutched Himalaya's leash tightly as they approached the park entrance, his eyes wide with excitement and apprehension. "Why don't you try the swings today, Herman?" his mother suggested gently, pointing to the empty swing set. Her son nodded hesitantly, taking a small step toward the playground. As they neared the play area, Herman's mother noticed an ice cream vendor setting up a cart near the park's entrance. "Oh, look, Herman. Would you like some ice cream?" she asked, thinking a cool treat might help ease her son's nerves. Herman's face lit up at the mention of ice cream, and he nodded enthusiastically. "Okay, sweetie, you and Himalaya wait by the bench, and I'll get us some ice cream." "I'll be right back," she said, giving Herman a reassuring pat on the shoulder before heading toward the vendor. Herman took a deep breath and looked at Himalaya. With his mother temporarily out of sight, the loyal dog wagged her tail encouragingly, as if to say, "Go on, you can do this." Emboldened by his companion's support, Herman slowly approached the swing set. However, a boy suddenly blocked his path. This boy was 2 years older than Herman and had a reputation for being the playground bully. He took great pleasure in picking on younger kids, especially those he perceived as different or vulnerable. The bully's eyes narrowed as he recognized Herman. Well, he sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "If it isn't the weird kid." Herman felt his chest tighten, his breath catching in his throat. He instinctively moved closer to Himalaya, seeking comfort in her familiar presence. The Labrador sensed Herman's distress, moving protectively closer to the boy, her usually relaxed demeanor becoming more alert. The bully, emboldened by Herman's silence, continued his taunting. "What's wrong, weirdo? Can't you speak for yourself, or do you need your dog to bark for you?" Herman's eyes darted around, searching for his mother, but she was still at the ice cream cart, engaged in conversation with the vendor. He was alone, facing fear without her immediate support for the first time. But then something unexpected happened. Instead of shrinking away or bursting into tears, as he might have done in the past, Herman took a deep breath. He remembered all the times Himalaya had stood by him, giving him strength when he felt weak. He thought about his progress, the words he had learned, and the confidence he had gained. With a voice that was soft but clear, Herman spoke up. "I can speak," he said, looking directly at the boy. "Himalaya helps me be brave, but I can talk for myself." The bully's eyes widened in surprise. He hadn't expected Herman to respond, let alone with such clarity. For a moment he was at a loss for words. But the bully quickly recovered, his surprise turning to anger at being challenged. "Oh yeah," he scoffed. "Then why don't you come and play without your stupid dog, or are you too scared to leave your babysitter behind?" Herman hesitated, looking at Himalaya for reassurance. The Labrador gave a soft woof and nudged Herman gently toward the playground. It was as if she was saying, "Go on, you can do this. I'll be right here." Taking another deep breath, Herman took a step forward. "Okay," he said, his voice a little stronger this time. "I'll play, but Himalaya isn't stupid. She's my friend, and she makes me strong." As Herman moved toward the swings, the bully, not used to being stood up to, especially by the kid he saw as an easy target, grabbed Herman's arm roughly. "Hey, I'm not done talking to you, weirdo." What happened next astonished everyone watching. Himalaya, who had always been gentle and patient, let out a single sharp bark. It wasn't aggressive, but it was loud enough to startle the boy into letting go of Herman's arm. In that moment of surprise, Herman found the courage he didn't know he possessed. Standing up straight, he looked the boy directly in the eye. "No, you are done talking to me. I want to play, and you can't stop me." The clarity and firmness in Herman's voice took the bully aback. He looked from Herman to the dog, sitting calmly but watching intently, and then back to Herman. Other children on the playground, who had been watching the confrontation unfold, began to gather around. They had always kept their distance from Herman, unsure how to interact with him, but now, seeing him stand up to the feared playground bully, they looked at him with new eyes. A little girl stepped forward. "Can I swing with you, Herman?" she asked tentatively. Herman's face broke into a wide, genuine smile. "Yes," he replied, his voice filled with newfound confidence. The bully began to back away, realizing he had lost his audience and his power over the situation. "Whatever," he mumbled, trying to save face. "The swings are boring anyway." He shuffled off, leaving Herman and his new potential friend behind. As Herman and the girl headed to the swings, with Himalaya following closely behind, the other children began to approach. They asked Herman questions about his dog, marveling at how well-behaved and friendly she was. Bolstered by his recent victory and Himalaya's steadfast presence, Herman answered their questions with growing ease. When his mother returned with the ice cream, she was astonished by the scene before her. Her son, who had once been so isolated, was now at the center of a small group of children, talking and laughing as he took turns on the swing. Tears of joy rose in her eyes as she watched Herman interact with his peers. He gestured animatedly, describing something to his new friends, his face alight with happiness. Himalaya sat nearby, her tail wagging contentedly as she kept a watchful eye on her young charge. As Herman caught sight of his mother, he waved excitedly. "Mom, Mom, I made friends," he called out, his voice carrying across the playground with a confidence she had never heard before. From that day forward, trips to the park became a regular and joyous part of Herman's routine. While the bully never became his friend, the bullying stopped. Other kids, impressed by Herman's bravery and drawn to his gentle nature, began to include him more in their games. The dog helped Herman connect with his classmates, overcoming his isolation. This unexpected friendship turned a potentially embarrassing situation into a heartwarming victory, showing that genuine emotion can be more powerful than words. In this heartwarming tale, we witnessed how a Labrador spotted a boy with Down syndrome, and their extraordinary bond changed their lives forever.